The table was set for 5. A small turkey, roasted to golden perfection, green beans with slivers of almonds, mashed potatoes with the perfect amount of butter, just the way Michael liked them, a basket of rolls, still warm from the oven, and, at the center, a small cake with "Happy 63rd Birthday, Eleanor," written in shaky blue letters. I'd done it myself this year. I straightened the silverware one more time and checked my watch. 6:45 p.m. They were supposed to be here at 6 course. My son Michael, his wife Vanessa, and their 2 children, and my daughter Amanda. I'd invited them all weeks ago.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
Just a small dinner, I'd said on the phone to Amanda. Nothing fancy. I just want to see everyone. Sure, Mom, she'd replied, that familiar, distracted tone in her voice. We'll be there. I sat down at the head of the table, smoothing the cream-colored tablecloth I'd ironed that morning. The house was quiet, except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, George's parting gift before our divorce 11 years ago. I supposed he thought it would help fill the silence he left behind. My phone chimed, a text from Michael. Sorry, Mom, Vanessa's not feeling well. The kids have homework. Rain check? I stared at the screen, the familiar ache settling in my chest. This was the 3rd rain check in 2 months. Last time it was a work emergency. Before that, some school function he'd forgotten about. The doorbell rang at 7:15. I hurried to open it, hope fluttering in my chest despite everything. Amanda stood on the porch, scrolling through her phone, not even looking up as I opened the door. You're late, I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. Traffic, she muttered, finally pocketing her phone. She stepped inside, giving me a quick, mechanical hug. She smelled of cigarettes and expensive perfume. Where is everyone? She asked, glancing around the empty hallway. Michael couldn't make it. Vanessa's not feeling well, apparently. Amanda gave me a look, the same one she'd been giving me since she was 16, part pity, part irritation. Again? Shocking, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. We walked to the dining room in silence. Amanda's eyes swept over the table. Set for 5, the cooling food, the little cake with its unlit candle. You really thought they'd all come, didn't you? She asked, dropping into a chair. I busied myself with serving plates, ignoring the burning behind my eyes. I was hoping. Mom, Amanda sighed, staring at her phone again. When are you going to get it? No one came for you. They came because they felt obligated, and now they don't even bother with that anymore. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I set the serving spoon down with a clatter. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Amanda finally looked up, her blue eyes, so like her father's, cold and distant. It means exactly what I said. Michael only showed up before because Vanessa made him. The kids don't even know you. And I'm only here because I was heading this way anyway. I sank into my chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Was this what my children thought of me? That I wasn't worth even an hour of their time on my birthday? I see, I said, my voice hollow. We ate in near silence, the scrape of forks against plates echoing in the empty dining room. Amanda talked about her new promotion, her upcoming vacation to Bali, her new condo downtown. Not once did she ask how I was doing. After dinner, I brought out the cake and lit the single candle in the center. Make a wish, Mom, Amanda said, her attention already back on her phone. I stared at the flickering flame, remembering all the birthday wishes of years past. Wishes for my children's happiness, for George to come back, for the family to be whole again. None of them had come true. Looking at Amanda, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, I finally understood. For years, I'd been trying to hold on to a family that no longer existed. I'd been pouring my heart into people who saw me as nothing, more than an obligation, a check to cash, a free babysitter when needed. I closed my eyes and made my wish. Not for them to love me, not for them to come back, but for the strength to let go. To build a life where I wasn't constantly waiting for crumbs of affection. I blew out the candle. Amanda stayed for exactly 45 minutes after cake before checking her watch and standing up. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. I nodded, walking her to the door. Thanks for coming, I said automatically. She gave me another quick, meaningless hug. I'll call you next week, okay? We both knew she wouldn't. After she left, I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence. I should have felt devastated, abandoned, but instead, something else was stirring inside me. A quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. I went back to the dining room and looked at the mess, the plates with half-eaten food, the cake with its extinguished candle, the empty chairs where my family should have been. No one came for you, Amanda had said. She was right, and maybe that was the wake-up call I needed. I began clearing the table, my mind suddenly clear and focused. As I wrapped leftover food and washed dishes, a plan started forming. The wish I'd made wasn't just a fleeting birthday fantasy. It was a promise to myself. I glanced at the calendar hanging on the refrigerator. In the morning light, the future didn't look empty anymore. It looked like a blank page waiting to be filled. By the time I went to bed that night, I knew what I had to do. My children had made their choice. Now it was time to make mine. The morning after my birthday, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't immediately check my phone for messages from the children. Instead, I made myself a proper cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen window, watching the early spring sun filter through the oak tree in my backyard. That tree had been a sapling when we first moved into this house 35 years ago. George. And I had planted it together, his arm around my waist, whispering promises about watching it grow old alongside us. The tree had kept its end of the bargain. George hadn't. I tried to pinpoint exactly when things had changed. When had I become an afterthought in my own family? It wasn't just the divorce, though that had certainly accelerated things. The truth was more painful. It had been happening for years, so gradually I barely noticed until it was too late. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. I almost answered automatically before stopping myself. What could she possibly want less than 24 hours after her cold appearance at my birthday? Taking a deep breath, I let it ring. The voicemail notification appeared minutes later. I pressed play, my fingers slightly trembling. Mom, it's me. Listen, I need a favor. Kyle has a business dinner tonight, and our regular sitter canceled. Could you watch Zoe? I'd drop her off around 6 and pick her up before 10. Call me back. No. How are you feeling after yesterday? No apology for her words. Just another request. Scrolled through my recent call history. The pattern was painfully obvious. Amanda only called when she needed a babysitter. Michael only called when he needed money for another investment opportunity. The last time either of them had called, just to check on me was. I couldn't even remember. The realization felt like ice water in my veins. I was nothing but a convenience to them. An ATM, a free childcare service, a repository for their problems. But when it came to celebrating my birthday, no one came for you. I set the phone down without returning Amanda's call. Instead, I walked to the small home office that had once been Michael's bedroom. The desk was covered with bills and paperwork, the mundane administrative details of a life put on hold for others. Opening my laptop, I began searching for something I'd been thinking about since last night: bus tickets to Portland. My old college roommate Judith had been inviting me to visit for years, but I'd always declined, citing family obligations. Eleanor, you need to live a little, she'd said during our last phone call 3 months ago. The kids are grown. They have their own lives. What about yours? I'd brushed her off then, making excuses. Now her words echoed in my mind with new meaning. The tickets weren't expensive. A one-way trip would cost $87.50, departing next Wednesday. My finger hovered over the purchase button. Was I really considering this? Leaving without telling anyone? My gaze drifted to the framed photo on the bookshelf, Michael's college graduation. We were all smiling, but if you looked closely, you could see the distance already forming. Michael standing slightly apart, Amanda checking her phone. George's hand barely touching my shoulder, already pulling away. The phone rang again. Amanda, for the second time. My heart pounded as I let it go to voicemail. Mom, seriously? I need to know about tonight. It's important. Call me back ASAP. Important to her, I thought bitterly. Never mind what might be important to me. I clicked purchase on the bus ticket. There was a moment of digital processing. Then a confirmation appeared on screen. I was going to Portland next Wednesday. A strange sensation washed over me, part exhilaration, part terror. I hadn't made a decision this significant on my own in decades. George had always controlled our major life choices, and after he left, I'd transferred that power to my children, desperately trying to maintain my place in their lives. But what place was that? The convenient grandmother? The emergency babysitter? The soft touch for a loan? I spent the afternoon going through my closet, mentally selecting what to pack. My wardrobe was full of practical, forgettable clothes, beige cardigans, navy slacks, sensible shoes. Clothes designed to blend into the background at my grandchildren's school events, where I stood alone while the other grandparents chatted in pairs. The phone rang again at 5:30. Amanda, her voice now tight with irritation. Mom, what is going on? I've been calling all day. I need to drop Zoe off in 30 minutes. Are you there or not? I picked up this time. I'm sorry, Amanda. I can't babysit tonight. Silence on the other end, then, what do you mean you can't? Do you have plans or something? The disbelief in her voice was almost comical. Yes, I said simply. I do have plans. What plans? Since when do you have plans on a Tuesday night? The dismissive tone in her voice solidified my resolve. I don't think that's relevant, Amanda. I'm not available tonight. Mom, this is ridiculous. Kyle's dinner is with the senior partners. It's been planned for weeks. I told you about it. She hadn't, but that wasn't the point. I'm sorry, but you'll need to find someone else. My voice was steady, surprising even me. I can't believe you're doing this, she said, her voice rising. This is so selfish. After everything we do for you. I cut her off. What exactly do you do for me, Amanda? Another stunned silence. What is that supposed to mean? It means exactly what I asked. What do you do for me? You couldn't even stay for an hour at my birthday dinner yesterday. You told me no one came for me, remember? Oh my God, are you still upset about that? It was just a comment, Mom. Don't be so sensitive. Just a comment. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. I have to go, I said quietly. Good luck finding a sitter. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from a strange, unfamiliar power. For the first time in years, I had said no. I had chosen myself. The phone rang again almost immediately. I turned it off. That night, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, looking at that old oak tree. It had survived storms, droughts, even a lightning strike that had scarred one side. But it still stood, still reached for the sky. I took a sip of wine and made a silent promise to myself. By next year's birthday, I would no longer be waiting for people who wouldn't come. I would be living, not just existing. And if my children wanted to be part of that life, they would have to see me, really see me, for the first time in years. My birthday wish was already coming true. I just had to be brave enough to follow through. The next week passed in a strange blur of purpose and guilt. During the day, I sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. At night, I lay awake, second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being selfish, just as Amanda had accused? But each time my phone rang, always Amanda or Michael wanting something, I found my resolve strengthening. Neither of them mentioned my birthday or asked how I was doing. Michael called twice for small loans that we both knew he'd never repay. Amanda called daily, her requests for babysitting now framed as chances for me to spend time with my granddaughter, as if she were doing me a favor. I said no each time, making vague excuses. I couldn't tell them about Portland yet. I needed to do this without their interference, without the emotional manipulation that would surely follow. The night before my departure, I sat at my dining room table, the same table where Amanda had delivered her cruel truth a week ago, and wrote 3 letters. One for Amanda, one for Michael, and one for Mrs. Patterson next door, who had agreed to collect my mail. The letters to my children were nearly identical. I've gone to visit an old friend for a while. I need some time to think and reflect. The house will be here, and so will I, eventually. But right now, I need space. Please respect that I'm not reachable by phone for the time being. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Love, Mom. Simple, direct, with no room for argument. I sealed them in envelopes and placed them on the counter where they'd be easily found. I packed just one suitcase, clothes, toiletries, a few photographs, and my mother's pearl earrings. Looking around my bedroom one last time, I was struck by how little of myself was actually reflected in it. The floral bedspread George had chosen, the generic landscapes on the walls that matched the furniture. Even my reading glasses sat atop books I'd never found time to finish, too busy accommodating everyone else's schedules. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing between exhilaration and terror. Was I really going to do this? Just walk away from my life at 63? What if something happened to the grandchildren while I was gone? What if Amanda or Michael truly needed me? But then I remembered Amanda's words. No one came for you. And I remembered all the times I'd needed them. After George left, when I'd had pneumonia 2 winters ago, when I'd called Michael in tears on what would have been my 35th wedding anniversary, and how quickly they'd dismissed my pain, too busy, with their own lives to concern themselves with mine. By morning, my doubts had hardened into determination. I called a taxi for the bus station, not trusting myself to drive with my nerves so on edge. As I waited on the porch with my single suitcase, I looked back at the house. 35 years of memories, some beautiful, many painful, all part of a life I was finally brave enough to reconsider. The taxi driver was chatty, asking where I was headed. Portland, I said, the word still feeling foreign on my tongue. Visiting family? He asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I hesitated. An old friend. Nice time of year for it, he nodded, mercifully dropping the subject. At the bus station, I felt conspicuous among the younger travelers with their smartphones and headphones. Did I look as out of place as I felt? A 63-year-old woman with a suitcase and no companion, embarking on what felt like an escape rather than a journey? I found a seat near the back of the bus, away from the handful of other passengers. As we pulled away from the station, a wave of panic washed over me. I could still call the whole thing off, get off at the next stop, take a taxi home, tear up those letters, pretend this moment of rebellion had never happened. My phone buzzed in my purse. Amanda. Probably looking for weekend babysitting. I let it ring, then turned it off completely. The panic subsided, replaced by a strange sense of lightness. The scenery began to change as we left the suburbs behind. Spring was painting the countryside in soft greens and yellows, farms and small towns flashing by the window. I hadn't been on a long bus journey since college. George had insisted on driving everywhere, and after he left, I rarely traveled at all. You should get out more, Judith had told me repeatedly over the years. See something new, meet new people. I'd always laughed it off. At my age, with what money, what would I even do? But now, watching the landscape change, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: curiosity. What would Portland be like? How had Judith's life turned out, with her choices so different from mine? She'd never had children, choosing instead to focus on her career as a librarian. When we'd reconnected on Facebook 5 years ago, I'd been secretly envious of her silver-streaked hair and confident smile, the way she posted photos from community theater productions and hiking trips with friends her own age. "You could do those things too," she'd insisted during our phone calls. "It's not too late." But it had felt too late. I'd built my identity around being a mother, a grandmother, an ex-wife, still maintaining the family home like a museum to a life that no longer existed. What would be left of me if I stepped away from those roles? I was about to find out. Halfway to Portland, the bus stopped at a small town station for a 30-minute break. Passengers filed out to stretch their legs and find food. I followed, suddenly aware of my stiff joints and empty stomach. In the station's idle small cafe, I ordered coffee and a sandwich. As I waited, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirrored wall behind the counter. Gray-streaked hair pulled back in my usual practical style. Minimal makeup applied out of habit rather than enjoyment. Sensible clothes in forgettable colors. But my eyes, they looked different somehow. Alert, present, perhaps even a little defiant. The cashier, a woman perhaps 10 years younger than me, smiled as she handed me my change. "Where you headed, honey?" "Portland," I replied, the destination feeling more real each time I said it. "Nice," she nodded. "Visiting or moving?" The question caught me off guard. "Just visiting. For now." She smiled knowingly. "That's how it starts. My sister just visited Colorado 5 years ago. Now she's got herself a little condo in Denver, and a gentleman friend who takes her dancing every weekend." I laughed, surprised by how easy it felt. "I don't think that's in the cards for me." "Never say never, honey," she winked. "My sister was 68 when she left her old life behind. Said it was the best decision she ever made." I carried my coffee back to the bus, her words echoing in my mind. Left her old life behind. Was that what I was doing? Or was this just a temporary escape, a brief rebellion before I inevitably returned to my role as the family convenience? As the bus continued its journey north, I watched the sun begin its descent, casting long shadows across fields and forests. My old life was back there somewhere, contained in letters on a kitchen counter. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. For the first time in decades, no one knew exactly where I was. No one was waiting for me to solve their problems or meet their needs. I was just Eleanor, a woman on a bus, heading towards something new. The thought was terrifying and wonderful. Judith's house was exactly as I'd imagined from our video calls. A cozy craftsman with a vibrant garden and a bright blue door. When she opened that door, her familiar laugh washed over me like a warm wave. "Eleanor Bennett, as I live and breathe," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of cinnamon and lavender. "You actually did it. I still can't believe it." I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. "That makes 2 of us." Judith stepped back, her hands still on my shoulders, examining me with the forthright gaze I remembered from our college days. "You look exhausted, but there's something different about you. A good different." "I feel different," I admitted, following her inside. The interior was nothing like my own carefully maintained, emotionally sterile house. Bookshelves overflowed with colorful spines. Art covered the walls, not generic landscapes, but vivid paintings and photographs. Plants thrived in every corner. It felt alive. "Guest rooms all set up," Judith said, leading me through the house. "And before you start with any, I don't want to impose nonsense, let me be clear. I've been waiting 10 years for you to visit. You're staying as long as you need." The guest room was small, but perfect, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a window overlooking a Japanese maple. I set my suitcase down, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what I'd done. What if I made a terrible mistake, Judith? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. She sat beside me on the bed, her gray-streaked hair falling in a casual braid over one shoulder. "What if you didn't?" she countered. "What if this is exactly what you've needed for years? That night, over homemade pasta and wine, I told her everything. Amanda's cruel comment, the years of being taken for granted, the growing emptiness I couldn't ignore anymore. "I should have left years ago," I confessed, staring into my wine glass. "Maybe," Judith shrugged. "Or maybe you weren't ready until now. Either way, you're here. So what's next?" The question caught me off guard. In my rush to leave, I hadn't thought beyond escape. "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't had a next that was just for me in decades." Judith smiled. "Then we'll figure it out together." The next morning, I turned my phone back on for the first time since boarding the bus. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 5 voicemails. The first voicemail was from Amanda, her tone irritated. "Mom, where are you? Mrs. Patterson said you left her a letter. Call me back immediately." The second, from Michael, sounded more concerned. "Mom, seriously, what's going on? Amanda's freaking out. Just let us know you're okay." By the fifth, Amanda's voice had shifted from annoyed to alarmed. "Mom, this isn't funny anymore. If we don't hear from you by tomorrow, we're calling the police." I sent a single text to both of them. "I'm safe. I meant what I said in my letter. I need time. Please respect that." Then I turned the phone off again and joined Judith for breakfast. "They're upset," I said, accepting a cup of coffee. "Of course they are," Judith nodded. "Their convenient mother has suddenly become inconvenient. They'll survive." The bluntness of her assessment made me wince, but I couldn't deny its accuracy. That afternoon, Judith took me on a tour of her neighborhood in Northeast Portland. The area hummed with a vibrant energy: small shops, cafes with outdoor seating, parks where people of all ages gathered. It was so different from my quiet, aging suburb, where neighbors barely acknowledged each other. "The community center's just down there," Judith pointed. "They have all sorts of classes: painting, pottery, writing. I teach a memoir workshop on Thursdays." "People want to write memoirs?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Everyone has a story, Ellie," she said, using my old college nickname. "Even you." We passed a small shop with a window display of handmade clothing and accessories. I paused, admiring a delicately embroidered scarf. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind me. I turned to find an elegant woman with silver hair cut in a stylish bob. She extended her hand. "I'm Meredith. That's my shop." "Eleanor," I replied, shaking her hand. "Your work is lovely. Do you sew?" she asked, glancing at the way I was examining the stitching. "I used to," I admitted. "Years ago, I made most of my children's clothes when they were small, and some of mine. It's been a long time, though." Judith gave me a surprised look. "You never told me you sewed." I shrugged. It didn't seem important. After the kids grew up, there wasn't much point. "Nonsense," Meredith said firmly. "Creativity doesn't need a purpose beyond itself. Come in, let me show you around." The next hour passed in a blur as Meredith showed us her workshop behind the store. Bolts of fabric in sumptuous colors and textures lined the walls. 3 sewing machines occupied a large table in the center. In the corner, a dress form wore a half-completed jacket in deep burgundy wool. "I teach small classes here," Meredith explained. "And I'm always looking for skilled hands. The demand for well-made, ethical clothing has really grown." "Eleanor's just visiting," Judith explained. "For now," I added, surprising myself. Back at Judith's that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about Meredith's shop. The colors, the textures, the quiet hum of creativity. It had awakened something in me I'd long forgotten. I haven't touched a sewing machine in 20 years, I told Judith as we prepared dinner. But being in that shop today, it felt familiar. Good. So do something about it, she said simply, chopping vegetables with efficient strokes. Like what? Like anything, Ellie. Take one of Meredith's classes, buy some fabric, start creating again. She pointed her knife at me for emphasis. Stop asking for permission to exist. Her words hit me like a thunderclap. That's exactly what I'd been doing for decades, asking permission to exist. From George, from my children, even from myself. Always putting my own desires last, if I acknowledge them at all. The next day, I returned to Meredith's shop and signed up for her intermediate sewing class. When she asked how long I'd be in Portland, I hesitated before answering. I'm not sure, I said honestly. I'm figuring things out. Meredith nodded approvingly. Good for you. Many women never even try. That afternoon, I called a real estate agent in my hometown and asked her to assess my house for possible rental options. Not selling, I wasn't ready for that finality, but a step toward freedom. Short-term rentals could bring in good income, the agent told me, especially with your location near the lake. How long are you looking to rent it out? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Let's start with 6 months and see. 6 months. The time frame sent a thrill of both terror and excitement through me. 6 months to discover who Eleanor Bennett might be beyond mother, grandmother, ex-wife. 6 months to build something new. That night, I dreamed of fabric flowing through my fingers, of colors and patterns taking shape under my hands. I woke feeling more rested than I had in years. Over morning coffee, Judith mentioned a small apartment for rent in her building. Just a studio, but it's bright and the landlord's decent. If you're thinking of staying a while, it might be perfect. I looked out the window at the Japanese maple, its delicate leaves dancing in the morning light. 2 weeks ago, I couldn't have imagined myself here, considering an apartment in a city where I knew almost no one. But now, the idea felt not just possible, but right. Let's look at it, I said, and Judith's smile told me she'd been hoping for exactly that answer. The studio apartment became mine in early May, a small miracle of exposed brick and morning light. It was barely 500 square feet, but after decades in a 4-bedroom house filled with other people's expectations, the space felt like freedom. I had furnished it simply, a comfortable bed, a second-hand desk beneath the window, and most importantly, a sewing table where I spent hours rediscovering my forgotten passion. The walls, once blank, now displayed fabrics I had designed, experiments in color and texture that Meredith called remarkably intuitive. My house back home was now rented to a young family, the income providing a cushion that allowed me this new beginning. The choice had been practical, but also symbolic. I had created space between my old life and whatever this new one was becoming. 3 times a week, I walked to Meredith's shop to help with alterations and small projects. It wasn't a real job. Not yet, but it was a purpose. On Thursdays, I attended Judith's memoir workshop, tentatively putting my own story into words. The other participants, mostly women my age or older, nodded in recognition when I described the invisible work of motherhood, the slow erasure of self. You're not alone in this, said Barbara, a retired school principal with kind eyes. Many of us disappeared into our families. The trick is remembering how to reappear. I was learning this reappearance daily, in small ways, choosing clothes for color rather than practicality, speaking up in conversations instead of deferring, making plans that centered my own interests rather than accommodating everyone else's. My children's messages had evolved from demanding to pleading to accusatory before finally tapering to occasional updates, largely from Michael, whose tone had softened somewhat. The kids ask about you sometimes, he texted in June. Zoe drew a picture of Grandma's adventure. I smiled at that, imagining my precocious granddaughter with her crayons. I sent back a genuine, Thank you and a promise to call soon. A promise I actually kept a few days later, though I maintained firm boundaries about my location and plans. By July, I had settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. My sewing had improved enough that Meredith was selling some of my scarves in her shop. My memoir pieces were being shared at local readings. I had friends, actual friends who saw me as Eleanor, not as someone's mother or ex-wife. Then, on a warm Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Amanda and Michael standing in the hallway, their expressions a mixture of relief and accusation. "Found you, Amanda," said, her voice cold. "Took us long enough." I gripped the doorframe, my heart racing. 6 months of careful rebuilding suddenly felt fragile as glass. "How did you—" "Judith's Facebook page," Michael explained, at least having the decency to look embarrassed. "She posted a photo of you two at some art show, tagged the location." "We need to talk, Mom." Amanda pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes scanning my new life with obvious judgment. "This has gone on long enough." Michael followed more hesitantly, nodding an awkward greeting. "You look good, Mom," he offered quietly. Amanda was already pacing my small living space, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floors. "So this is where you've been hiding? Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" I closed the door slowly, gathering my composure. This confrontation had been inevitable. I just hadn't expected it today, hadn't prepared the words I would need. "I wasn't hiding," I said finally, "and I told you I was safe." "A text message," Amanda's voice rose. "After decades of being there for us, you just disappeared with a cryptic note and a text message." "Being there for you," I repeated, the phrase igniting something in me. "Yes, I was always there for you, but where were you for me?" Amanda stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, where were we for you? We're your children." "Yes, you are," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "But I'm also a person who spent her birthday alone except for a daughter who told her no one came for you." Michael winced, glancing at his sister. "You said that to Mom." Amanda rolled her eyes. "I didn't mean it like that. She's being dramatic." "I meant it exactly like that," I said quietly. "And it was true, wasn't it? No one came for me. Not for years. I was just convenient, babysitting, loans, emotional support." "When was the last time either of you asked how I was doing and actually listened to the answer?" The question hung in the air between us. Michael looked down, hands shoved in his pockets. Amanda's jaw tightened. "So you ran away," she said accusingly. "Real mature, Mom." "I didn't run away," I corrected her. "I chose myself for the first time in decades. There's a difference." I gestured around the small apartment, at the fabrics draped over my work table, the half-finished designs pinned to my inspiration board. "This isn't hiding. This is living." Michael moved toward my work area, examining a scarf with genuine interest. "You made these? They're really good, Mom." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his sincerity. "I've been selling them at a local shop." "Selling them?" Amanda's eyebrows shot up. "Like for money?" "That's generally how selling works," I replied, unable to keep the wry tone from my voice. Michael laughed, then quickly disguised it as a cough when Amanda shot him a glare. "Look," I said, softening slightly, "I understand this was a shock, but I needed to find out who I am besides your mother. I'm 63 years old, and until 6 months ago, I couldn't answer that question." "But why didn't you tell us where you were going?" Michael asked. "We were worried." "Would you have let me go?" I asked simply. His silence was answer enough. Amanda wasn't finished. "So what now? You're just abandoning your family, your grandchildren? What about holidays? What about when we need you?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said firmly. "But I'm not returning to the way things were either. I can be in your lives without sacrificing my own." I took a deep breath, then continued. "I love you both. I love my grandchildren. But I also love this life I'm building. It's possible to have both, but only if we create a new relationship, one based on mutual respect, not just your convenience. Mutual respect? Amanda repeated incredulously. We're your children. Yes, and you're also adults, I pointed out. Adults who have lives that don't revolve around me. I'm simply asking for the same consideration. Michael was nodding slowly, his expression thoughtful. That's fair, I guess. He glanced around the apartment again. You seem happy here, Mom. I am, I said simply. Well, I think it's selfish, Amanda declared, arms crossed. Dad always said you were too wrapped up in yourself. I couldn't help but laugh. Your father left me for his 28-year-old secretary after 30 years of marriage. I don't think he gets to comment on selfishness. Michael snorted, and even Amanda's lips twitched slightly. Look, I said, moving to put on the kettle. Stay for tea. Let me show you around Portland tomorrow. Get to know this part of my life, then we can talk about how to move forward. The next morning, as we walked through the Saturday market, I watched my children absorb this world I'd created for myself. Michael seemed genuinely curious, asking questions about my routine, my friends, my work. Amanda remained more reserved, but I caught her watching me interact with Meredith at her stall, perhaps seeing me through new eyes. You have a whole community here, she said later, sounding surprised. I do, I acknowledged. It's something I didn't realize I was missing. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Michael back to his family, Amanda to a business conference in Seattle, there was an awkward moment at the door. Will you visit soon? Michael asked. The kids really do miss you. I will, I promised. But on my terms, no more disappearing into the background of your lives. He nodded, pulling me into a hug that felt more genuine than any we'd shared in years. Amanda hesitated, then said stiffly, I still think you could have handled this differently. Probably, I agreed. But would you have heard me if I had? She didn't answer, but the slight softening around her eyes suggested she understood more than she was willing to admit. After they left, I sat on my small balcony, watching the summer sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A year had passed since that lonely birthday dinner when Amanda's cruel words had finally broken through decades of self-sacrifice and silent acceptance. No one came for you, she had said, and she had been right. No one had come for me, not my children, not my ex-husband, not even myself. Until now. A week later, on my 64th birthday, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment. Judith was there, and Meredith, Barbara from my writing group, and a few other friends I'd made. In Portland, we ate good food, drank wine, and laughed until my sides hurt. When they brought out a cake with swirling blue frosting, the same color as the one I'd made myself a year ago, tears sprang to my eyes. Make a wish, Eleanor, Judith said, raising her glass. I looked around at these people who saw me, really saw me, and smiled. The wish I'd made last year, as I sat alone at my dining room table, had already come true. I had found the strength to rebuild my life, to discover joy and purpose on my own terms. This year, as I blew out the candles, I wished only for the courage to keep going, to nurture this hard-won independence while opening my heart to new connections, including a healthier relationship with my children. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a text message from Michael. Happy birthday, Mom. The kids made you cards. We'd love to see you next month if you're free. No demands, no assumptions, just an invitation. Progress. I smiled and typed back, thank you. I'd love that. Let's plan something that works. For all of us. Then I set down my phone and rejoined my friends, my heart full with the knowledge that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not defined by what I gave to others, but by what I had finally given to myself. The chance to be seen, the permission to exist fully, the gift of my own life, reclaimed.